Hi, we're going to be reading about Katherine Johnson. Katherine is a mathematician who got the first man on the moon in a rocket ship. So we're going to be reading this book. We're going to be thinking about character traits. A trait is a quality or characteristic that usually belongs to a person. We're going to be thinking about heroes. Katherine is one of my heroes. So as I read, let's find a specific trait that we think Katherine has, and then we're going to find examples in the text to support that we think that that is an important character trait of Katherine's. Then you're going to be able to use Oreo opinion to write an essay. All right, a computer called Katherine. I need my glasses. A computer called Katherine. Everywhere she went, Katherine counted. She counted her steps to church. She counted the plates on the dinner table. She even tried counting the stars in the sky. So let's start thinking, what trait are we noticing that Katherine has? How would you describe it? Most important of all, Katherine counted the days until she could start school. Finally, at age 5, she followed her brother hundreds of steps to the 2-room schoolhouse. It's an old-fashioned schoolhouse long ago. An excellent student, Katherine devoured. That means she got to so many books, it was like she was eating books, thick books, and added numbers at the speed of light. So the teacher decided she should skip 1st grade and start 2nd grade. But Katherine was such a fast learner, she later skipped 5th grade too. And before you could say mathematician magician, she was a grade ahead of her older brother. A lot of you are mathematician magicians. All right, so we're noticing that she is really into math. Start thinking of words. How do you describe somebody who's really into math? They are, turn and talk to somebody or just say it to me. Okay. Katherine loved math because it was easy to see if an answer was right or wrong. Meanwhile, everyone in town was arguing about right or wrong. Some people said it was wrong for children with different skin color to attend the same schools. Others said it wasn't right for women to work at the same jobs as men. Their arguments seemed wrong to Katherine. As wrong as 5 + 5 is 12. She believed everyone should be treated the same, so she kept working hard at school. And she dreamed of a future where all people would have equal rights. I want you to think, somebody who's working hard all the time. Well, first of all, hard worker, that could be one of the traits. I'm going to use the word determined. I think Katherine is determined. Now, you might have another word that you want to use. It seems like Katherine is determined on every page so far. And here I'm going to say she's determined. She's arguing that she should keep working hard in school, right? So I'm going to give that example. Katherine finished 8th grade when she was only 10 years old, but her town didn't have a high school for Black students. Determined, they even used the word in the text. Determined to keep learning, she counted the dusty miles, 120 in all, as her family moved closer to school that she could attend. There she took an exciting math class called geometry. And I know a lot of you have done geometry, or you're doing it, or you're going to do geometry, but we all did it in 1st grade. She learned how points and lines made shapes, triangles, trapezoids, and perfect parallelograms. And her love for math kept growing. So number 2 on this page, how is she being determined? I want you to think, how's she being determined? Turn and talk to somebody or say it to the screen. I think that she's determined because the town didn't have a high school, and she counted the 120 miles it took to get to her new school. And I'm going to put that under number 2 example. Look at all those shapes that we work on. At 15, Catherine started college. She flew through every math class in West Virginia State, so a professor taught harder classes just for her. In advanced geometry, she plotted points on a graph. When she connected the points, they created a beautiful U-shaped curve called a parabola. It was love at first sight. After graduation, Catherine became a math teacher. Back then, people said women could be only teachers and nurses. Catherine knew that that was wrong, and as wrong as 10 minus 5 equals 3. She believed women could be anything: scientists, lawyers, mathematicians. So once again, I think that's an example of Catherine being determined, knowing that women could do anything that's in their heart. And she kept working towards it. Catherine discovered a research center in Virginia that was hiring women mathematicians. They were called computers because they made calculations that helped the men engineers design airplanes and flight patterns. So I want you to look at this picture. I know that we know what a computer is to us, but look at this. These are literally people computing math problems. And that's how the word computer got used for that machine. Isn't that interesting? To Catherine, it added up to the perfect job. All day long, she punched buttons on a calculator. That's a calculator. It adds numbers. Just like the other women, she solved long math equations just like the other women. She wrote answers on a huge data sheet just like the other women. They're all working really hard computing. So Catherine showed up at the next meeting ready to work. Wait. Let me make sure. I feel like I skipped a page. Yes, I skipped a page. Catherine wasn't like the other women. She asked questions, lots of questions. What were her calculations used for? Why were they important? How did her answers help design the airplanes and flights? She had all these questions because she was what? Determined. The men engineers noticed that the women who asked intelligent questions and how quickly she solved the problems. They all noticed her. So they asked Catherine to join their space team. Its mission sent America's first astronaut into space. Now that's a really big deal, right? Blast off. Catherine said yes. Why? Because she was, say it out loud, determined. But then she discovered that women weren't allowed to attend the groups that were the meetings. Catherine knew that this was wrong as 5 times 5 is 20. 5 5s, let's do that. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. So she asked if she could go. Women don't ever go to those, the engineers replied. Is there a law against it? Catherine asked. No, said the engineers. Well, I think that's very determined, don't you? Catherine saying, why can't I come to your meeting? And putting it out there that that's something she wanted to do. So I'm going to put that as example number 3. Catherine, determined to go to the meetings with the other engineers. So Catherine showed up at the next meeting, ready to work. Astounded by her geometry skills, the team asked her to calculate when America's first space flight should blast off. Wow. Catherine agreed, but first she asked questions like, where should the rocket splash down? How high should it fly? When should it land? These are all great questions. With that information, Catherine carefully computed the rocket's flight. It was a beautiful U-shaped curve. Next, she worked backwards to figure out the time it should blast off. And then she began counting the days until the launch. And I'm going to say this is my number 4. Why do you think she was being determined here? Think about what was determined about what she was just doing. Okay, I said with all this information, she was computing all these facts and trying to figure it out. And that takes a lot of determination. So already I have 4 examples of how she was determined. Now, if I want to add more bubbles, I could draw more bubbles and write more examples of this trait. On May 5th, 1961, Alan Shepard blasted off. Following Catherine's flight path, he soared into the silvery sky. 15 minutes later, he splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean right on schedule and right on target. So that means that Catherine's calculations were correct. She's a hero. Soon, Americans began dreaming of a longer flight around the entire Earth. To figure out the math for this long, complicated trip, engineers decided to use their new room-sized computer that worked much faster than people. But astronaut John Glenn trusted Catherine more than a machine. He wouldn't step foot onto a rocket until she said that the computer calculations were correct. Happy to help, Catherine checked every number. On February 20th, 1962, John Glenn became the first astronaut to orbit the Earth. That means to go around the Earth. And that was thanks to Catherine's calculations. Then people began wondering if an astronaut could travel all the way to the moon. Both the Soviet Union, which is Russia, and the United States wanted to be the first to land there and win the space race. Catherine knew this flight was incredibly long and dangerous. Every calculation would have to be perfect. One math mistake and the rocket would zoom right past the moon. That's a big responsibility, but I think she's determined enough to figure it out. As NASA's computer hummed and computed a flight path to the moon and back, Catherine went to work too, double-checking the machine's calculations. But this was the most complicated geometry problem that she'd ever seen. One of the points, the spacecraft was flying incredibly fast. Her target, the moon, was consistently circling the Earth while spinning. Some people thought the problem was too difficult to solve, but Catherine knew that that was as wrong as 25 divided by 5 equals 4. Because she was determined. She calculated and computed and plotted and planned. She created a bold, brave path all the way to the moon and back. Wow, and that's my 5th bubble. So if I had my marker with me, I would draw a bubble right there and I would put my number 5 inside the bubble. And I said, double checking a computer is very determined. 10, 9, ignition sequence starts. Hearts racing, Catherine leaned close to the small television screen. 7, 6, 5. She held her breath as powerful flames exploded on the launch pad. 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off. The rumbling rocket slowly rose above the ground, above the smoke, above the clouds, and then disappeared into black space. 4 days later, Neil Armstrong took his first step on the moon. And Catherine smiled and began to count. So Catherine made that happen. And this is a real picture, a photograph of Catherine. Here's some of the math that she did. And here's her calculations. And Catherine has a famous quote, "If you want to know, ask a question. There's no such thing as a dumb question." So we all know that asking a good question can get you really far. So this is a great book, and this is one of my heroes. So now we know that my hero, Katherine Johnson, I would write that right here, my name and the date. I would write my examples of why I think she's determined. And then I could use my Oreo opinion. in my opinion, who do I think is a hero? Katherine Johnson is a hero. My reason is I think she is determined. Examples. It says 1 to 3, but you are welcome to give more than 3. And then I would say, for example, she did not quit school. She then traveled very far to go to high school. And I would say, in order, all the examples that support why I think she was determined. So you could write that all out, send it to your teacher, send this to your teacher. I'm going to be putting this attached in the same place that you could watch this video. Okay, Grant Geckos, I want you to blast off into great opinion writing. Go Geckos!